was a hectic scene in front of Brian and Nicole Albert's home in Canton, Massachusetts on the morning of January 29th. Police, firefighters, and paramedics all responding because Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found unresponsive on the ground in the snow. Officer O'Keefe had spent the prior evening bar hopping downtown. The Alberts were hosting an after party and had invited John and his girlfriend, Karen Reed. Karen never went inside. She says she dropped John off and went back to his house, then woke up early and began frantically looking for him. Prosecutors say Karen is the one who killed John. They say she ran him over with the back of her car on purpose because their relationship had soured and she was filled with jealous rage. Karen says that's not true and believes it was actually the people inside the house who ambushed John and then framed her for his murder. Jennifer and Matt McCabe were in the house that night, and Jennifer McCabe was with Karen Reed the next morning when they found John O'Keefe. Tonight, the testimony of the McCabes. What does it show? What does it prove? Will the jury believe it? We take a look with our insiders as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Officer John O'Keefe. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and our coverage of the Karen Reed murder trial continues. Now, from the prosecution perspective, this is a very simple case. It's taking them a long time, but it's really a simple case. Karen Reed purposely backed her car into John O'Keefe, struck him, ran him over, left him in the snow to die. Hit and run. A hit and run on purpose. That's their case. Straightforward, simple. Now, the defense has their own theory, and it's a little more complicated. It's a conspiracy. They're alleging a conspiracy. They're not saying that one other person did it and you have the wrong person, or it's a witness misidentification. No, it's much more intricate and complicated than that. So at first level, it's a conspiracy between the state and local police. So you've got the Massachusetts State Police who took over the investigation from the local police, the Canton Police Department. And they're saying that these two police departments, both seemingly part of this conspiracy to cover up what really happened, to protect the people who are really responsible, and to literally frame Karen Reed by planting evidence, not doing interviews, writing things down in reports that weren't 100% accurate, not investigating people who were involved, according to the defense and their conspiracy, what they're alleging here. So that's one level of this, right, which is law enforcement. I've seen that before. I've seen that before, alleged, and we've seen it actually take place, police cover-ups of crimes that they commit. Maybe it's excessive use of force or a bad shooting, and some officers cover for others, and there's sort of a cover-up, and they lie, and they say the person who they beat up is the one who actually started everything. Like, we've seen cases like that. But this is different. This is different because the conspiracy goes to another level now. The next level involves the Alberts. And there's two members of the Alberts family. You've got the ones who own the home, and then you've got the other Alberts, which are the Alberts who are actually friends with the victim. You've got the other Albert who they're pointing the finger at. You've got the Alberts who own the home, and you've got Alberts who are connected to law enforcement, right? Brian Albert's a Boston police officer, and so was John O'Keefe, the victim in all of this. But the Boston Police Department really isn't involved in this investigation. It's the Canton Police, the local Canton Police, and the state police. But the Albert family also being accused of covering things up, of lying, and coordinating all of this. Again, to cover up a crime that happened in Brian Albert's home. Inside the home, not on the yard, but inside the home, okay? Also involved in this, another family, are the McCabes. And the McCabes lying for the Alberts. The McCabes saying things or attributing things to Karen Reed that she didn't actually say, seeing things they didn't necessarily see, saying that they didn't see other things that they should have seen, right? So there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of people involved. But I think at the primary level here, you're talking about the state and local police, the Alberts, and the McCabes. So it's important to understand how everyone knows each other. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of this, just so you have a better, because it gets very confusing very quickly, right? Very confusing. My job is to cover this story, right? Is to understand the story, and you got to keep studying it. So let's walk through that. Let's start with John O'Keefe, the victim in all of this. He is friends with Jennifer McCabe because his niece, who he is raising, and Jen's daughter are friends. So there's a connection between John O'Keefe and Jennifer McCabe, and they were communicating that night via text, and they saw each other at the bar. Jennifer McCabe and Matthew McCabe are husband and wife. They are married. And Jennifer and Matthew McCabe have a daughter named Allison McCabe, also known as Allie. She testified. You saw her on the witness stand. She's an important figure in all of this as well, according to the defense theory here. Now, where are we? Jennifer McCabe's sister is Nicole Albert, okay? Again, the McCabes and the Alberts. Nicole Albert is married to Brian Albert. They're the ones who own the home. Brian is the Boston police officer. Knew John O'Keefe, sort of, but wasn't close to him. Somebody else in his family actually was closer. Their children are Brian Jr. It was his birthday that they were celebrating in the house before the adults came home, even though he's an adult at this point. And Caitlin Albert is their daughter. Brian Albert Sr.'s brother is Chris Albert. Okay, Chris Albert has testified as well. Chris is married to Julie Albert, and they were not at the party. They were at the bar that night, but they didn't go back to the house. But somebody in their family was apparently at the house, their son, Colin Albert, okay? Colin Albert, you saw his testimony. The defense is pointing the finger at him and his cut-up knuckles. Now, Colin is friends with Allie McCabe, and she is the one who drove him home from the Alberts' home. And we saw those text messages. 12:10 was apparently the time that she showed up to pick up Colin. So you see how important Allison McCabe is for Colin Albert in this case. And you see their connection. They're friends, and they're like cousins. Their cousins are cousins. So they're sort of related, but not directly. Now, Colin's mom, Julie Albert's best friend is Courtney Proctor. Okay, Courtney Proctor. Courtney Proctor's brother, not her husband, but her brother is Trooper Michael Proctor. Okay, so you see where this is, the connections are. Colin Albert's mom, best friend, is the sister of Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor led the investigation into John O'Keefe's death. He is a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police. So there you have the connections. There'll be a test at the end of the program. Now, let's bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, joining us tonight live from outside the courthouse in Dedham, Massachusetts. I say this every night, Matt. Another big day inside the courtroom, and it certainly was. Let's start talking first about Jennifer McCabe. Jennifer McCabe, in the buildup to this case, has been a very prominent name. The defense has spoken a lot about her in pretrial hearings. Today was her day in court on the stand, and she described that moment when she, along with Karen Reed, found John O'Keefe on the yard in the snow.
It was a huge moment, Vinny. Nice to see you. And we're rounding out week 3 in the killer cover-up murder trial. And everybody here at the courthouse and everybody else that we talked to here in this small, tight-knit community are saying perhaps this was the biggest day of the trial yet. Because you had that person that is friends with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed, the person who was called, There she is on the stand, Jen McCabe. She was called by Karen Reed in the morning. Karen Reed went to her house. She and Carrie Roberts were in the car with Karen Reed as she ran out and then ran to John O'Keefe. And she also talks about what Karen Reed was doing and saying when they found his body at 34 Fairview. Take a listen to her key testimony today.
Karen, we saw you outside of my sister's.
And what was her response to that?
She told me that she didn't remember going there. And then she started yelling, Jen, Jen. And then she was saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? And then she proceeded to say that she had a cracked taillight. In the car was Carrie Roberts, and so she kind of rolled down the window and was like, Karen, what are you doing? And then the plow was behind her, so Carrie pulled up, and I told Karen that I was going to drive her car because I didn't want her driving because she was hysterical. So we got in her car, and then Carrie Roberts called Karen, and then Karen was screaming and, saying that she had cracked her taillight. We need to go to Fairview. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? And then she would just scream our names. Carrie was telling her to shut up. We drive past the flagpole area, and all of a sudden, Karen starts screaming, there he is, and she's banging to get out.
And banging on the door in the back seat?
Yes.
And at the time that she's saying this, were you able to see anything outside of the vehicle?
I saw nothing. Miss Roberts looked at me and said something like, she's crazy or she's bat crazy, something like that.
And when the defendant gets out of the vehicle, where is it that she goes?
She just runs.
And runs with?
Straight to John. She straddles John and she lifts up his shirt, and then she lifted up her shirt and went to lay on him. And Miss Roberts went over and she was removing the snow from his face.
More testimony, another witness, Vinny, saying they heard, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And she also looked over at the jury when she said that, and she said, I heard it crystal clear. And this jury is paying close attention. Every time a witness says something that they overheard Karen Reed say in what they testified to, they write it down.
You know, the description of this ride over is just, it seems Karen Reed is completely frantic, like out of her mind, even before they find him in the snow. And she's like screaming about his ex-girlfriends and other things. It really was a bizarre description of what the scene was like there. But I guess another one of the big takeaways for prosecutors from this is that no one else in that car saw John O'Keefe. Only Karen Reed did, which, you know, the implication there is that she knew he was there because that's where she had left him.
Well, you know, we're also waiting to hear from Carrie Roberts, and you also have to keep in mind that we've only heard direct examination of Jen McCabe in the first place. But the jury has an additional day to think about all of this because she's not back on the stand until Tuesday. Court is dark on Monday.
Okay, let's get to now the testimony and the issue that I believe really gave birth to the Free Karen Reed movement, which is the Google search done by Jennifer McCabe. There's a discrepancy of when she did it, but what about that Google search?
This was the moment everyone at the courthouse was waiting for. As soon as we knew Jen McCabe was going to be called to the stand, everybody started talking about what will she say about the Google search. I mean, this is the real divisive piece of evidence for everybody. If you're on one side or the other, the Karen Reed supporters, they hold signs with "House long to die" in the cold. because remember, she misspelled it on her phone when she says that Karen Reed asked her to do that Google search. There is even billboards on trucks in front of the courthouse before some of these court hearings about this particular search. And today, she was asked about it on the stand, on direct. Here's what she testified to.
She grabbed my hands and she said, Google hypothermia, Google how long it takes to die in the cold. And so I had my phone out and it was cold and my hands were frozen and I have MS, and I took my phone out while she was screaming and shaking my arm, and I attempted to Google how long does it take to die in the cold.
The defense is adamant that the search took place at around 2:20 in the morning, and she is going to be cross-examined about it. But we were asking, along with the other media, what Alan Jackson thought about that testimony today and what we can expect. Here's what he told us outside the courthouse.
That Google search was at 2:27 in the morning. That's when the Google search happened, and you'll find out why we know that.
Again, we're waiting. We have to wait an additional day for that cross-examination to begin. And the defense attorneys also told us that they don't think that it's a bad thing that the jury, the 17 that are hearing the case, have an extra day to think about that direct examination and that answer.
Yeah, it's always nice if you, as you know, when you're trying a case, if you finish before, and you finish on a note that you think is positive before there's some time off. But they'll be back Tuesday. That means you have some time to rest up, Matt Johnson. Great reporting out there in Dedham, Massachusetts. Thank you so much, sir. All right, when we come back, we're going to bring in our trial insiders, take a closer look at the testimony of Jennifer McCabe, crucial witness for the prosecution and perhaps even more crucial potentially for the defense. Also, coming up next hour.
Madeline Soto's 13th birthday party was on Sunday, February 25th. The party was at a relative's house and she was surrounded by family. But one person who wasn't there was her mother, Jen Soto. She was working. Madeline's mother and father were not together. In fact, her dad married another woman a couple months after she was born. But there was a man living in her house, her mom's boyfriend, Stephen Stearns. Stearns was at the birthday party, and at some point after the party and before she was supposed to be at school the next day, Madeline was murdered. Stearns has been arrested and charged with doing it. He has waived all his court appearances, but tonight we hear from Stearns for the first time being interviewed by police.
This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Prosecutors say she ran him over on purpose and left him to die in the cold.
But Reed claims that she's being framed.
It smells suspicious.
After years of legal fireworks, will the truth finally be revealed?
The end game is to figure out who killed John O'Keefe and hold these people responsible.
The Killer or Cover-Up Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Went over to the storm door and looked out. What, if anything, did you see?
I saw a vehicle.
And can you describe the vehicle that you saw?
I saw a dark SUV.
And as far as Ms. Nagel, did you make any observations of where she was when you looked outside?
I kind of just looked at the vehicle, and then I saw lights kind of over to this side. But then once I saw the vehicle, I took out my phone and I texted John.
That's Jennifer McCabe talking about texting John O'Keefe, the victim in the case, the police officer, the boyfriend of Karen Reed, who was found on the lawn. Now, these text messages are crucial evidence, I think, for both sides in terms of trying to establish some timeline of when all of this, depending upon which version you believe, could have happened. So let's take a listen to her describing the text messages back and forth, and then we'll bring in our insiders to see exactly what it means. Let's take a look.
So this one is from myself to John, and it says here at 12:27. So at that point, I see a car out front, and I text him here.
you testified to as far as looking out the front storm door, seeing a car, and then you sent a text. That was a text.
Correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to that. And ma'am, similar, if you could just, who sent it, what's the content, and what is the time?
I sent to John, pull behind me at 12:31.
And what were you referring to when you said pull behind?
So at this point, the car had moved from the prior spot where I originally saw it. So I thought, what is he doing? Why don't they just pull behind me in the, in the driveway?
Can you just scroll down? And again, with this bubble, if you could read out.
From me to John saying hello, and it was at 12:40.
And at this point in time, as far as, let me ask it this way. When you're sending these text messages over these periodic time periods, what, if anything, are you doing sort of in between?
So I originally went to the front door, saw the car, texted them, then texted John. Then I went back, kind of sat at the table, just either threw my phone probably in my back pocket. And then a couple minutes later, I got up again and saw that the car had moved. So I had sent the pull behind me. And then a few minutes later, I went back to the window, to the front door, I'm sorry.
And when you went back to the front door, what, if anything, did you see at that?
So at this specific point at 12:40, when I say hello, I cannot be certain whether they were still out front or if they had left.
And from any of these text messages that you sent, what, if any, response did you receive from Mr. O'Keefe after the weird tooth?
None.
Ms. Gilman, if you could, to the next level. And similar to the prior ones that we did just read.
Sure. Jen to John, where are you? And that was at 12:42.
The next level.
Myself to John, hello, at 12:45.
So no response from John O'Keefe. Let's bring in our experts, our insiders. Joining me tonight, Karen Reed supporter and expert Nick Rocco, criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr., who at one time represented Colin Albert, and the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan, is with us. Great to see everyone. Okay, I have a couple questions, important ones, okay? All these times are being thrown out. We've heard from all these witnesses. I'm still trying to figure out one question for both sides here, and I'll begin, Kevin, with you. When exactly was John O'Keefe run over by Karen Reed?
Well, we haven't got to that in the case yet, but we know from what was revealed in previous documents that it was at 12:32 that John's phone moved for the last time. So right before that, maybe a minute before that, is when Jen sent him a text to pull up behind us. So it's really tragic to think about what was going on at that time. We'll never know exactly. They're just looking out the window, taking glances out. So trying to piece all that together later is difficult, but we do have that data, and hopefully we'll get more data from Karen's phone revealed to us.
So from the phones, Joseph Krowski Jr., how important do you think it is for prosecutors here to nail down the time that they believe the murder took place, with all these people dropping people off, picking people up, and looking out the windows?
So today had to be a sobering day for the defense, right? I think there's a little gamesmanship by Attorney Jackson. You always want to leave, especially before a long weekend, on a high note. There's always a risk when you hyperbolize in your opening statement. And, you know, David Yannetti promised that Karen Reed was framed. And one of the architects of that conspiracy to frame was Jen McCabe. The jury got to meet Jen McCabe today, and the juxtaposition between Jen McCabe and Karen Reed can't be any more different. Jen McCabe is a mom. She's a wife. She's a coach. She befriended John O'Keefe. She loved John O'Keefe as a friend. She was a surrogate to John O'Keefe's niece. He welcomed in Karen Reed, and they had some commonality over a medical condition. She took the witness stand today, and I was there, and the camera doesn't do it justice. And she was clear. She was concise. She was believable. What she said was plausible. What she said was backed up by those texts. Now consider the juxtaposition with Karen, who was described as irrational, perhaps intoxicated, argumentative, jealous. We've now first heard about the woman Ashley that John had dated before, which might explain why John O'Keefe and Karen never go into that party. So this was a really difficult day for the defense. And I have to, it's not funny, so I don't laugh, but with each passing day, it's more and more ludicrous. We were promised the gaudy crime syndicate, and you see the McCabe family walking across that crosswalk. So this was a really, really difficult day for the defense.
Nick Rocco, I can let you can respond to all of that, but I also want you to tell me, when did John O'Keefe go in the house?
Well, John O'Keefe went in the house the minute Karen got there. He got out of the car. Jen's SUV was parked, the last car. She has a huge SUV. So the reason why Nagel and the rest of them wouldn't see John O'Keefe going in the house is because the minute he opened the door, he was being blocked by that SUV. And possibly Julie Nagel might be stating that she didn't see Karen Reed's vehicle outside, because that means that would have been the same exact time John was coming inside the house. But as far as what Kevin said, when John's phone stopped moving around 12:32, Jen McCabe sent another text around 12:40, and she stated that she was looking outside the door at that point. So if she was looking outside the door at that point and John's phone wasn't moving, let's say Karen hit him at 12:32 when the phone stopped moving, that means he was lying dead on the lawn at that point, and Jen didn't see him. Nobody saw John O'Keefe on the lawn. Nobody saw a taillight or a shoe or a hat, because John was not on the lawn. I mean, that text message right there at 12:42, where are you? Well, he's not on the lawn, is he?
Let me ask you, Kevin, about another big part. I want to get to one more issue.
One comment?
Go ahead.
I think someone saw, unfortunately and tragically, John O'Keefe on the lawn, and that was made abundantly clear today, and that was, tragically, Karen Reed.
Kevin, let me ask you about the Google search. How long to die in the cold?
The 227 search is about as real as Slender Man. I guess if enough people believe in it, maybe it starts to dawn a little bit of reality. The paramedic on the ambulance heard Karen asking for the exact same kind of thing that she asked Jen to search for. That should put it to rest, but if it doesn't, you have the Ian Whiffen, the creator of the software, the executive forensic data expert from the Celebrate, the software that was used to find that search. He's going to testify for the prosecution. He's already explained it. Jessica Hyde, an elite forensic data person, independent, is going to testify for the prosecution. All the defense has is just, I mean, this is a dangerous thing we're getting here, where data streams they're surrounding us, and they're getting so sophisticated that even the people that create them don't always predict what they're going to do. And all it takes is a defense to find some random thing, and people are going to seize on it, when you really need to look at the totality of the data.
Nick, is this the most important piece of evidence from your perspective, this search that the defense is alleging is at 2:27 in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, the Google search at 2:27 is going to be crucial. Now, I don't claim, nor am I, a digital forensic expert, but what I can say is that digital forensic data is used every single day in prosecutors' cases, and it's happening daily in Massachusetts currently, right now, in some pretty high-profile cases. And when such incriminating evidence is used against them, the only option that they have to do is basically to try to confuse the jury with technical gibberish. And that's exactly what they're doing with the location of John's data, putting him inside the house, right? So first they try to hide the Google search. Now they have to discredit it with techno babble. And people I don't think are going to buy into all these fancy words that the experts are going to use. And the fact of the matter is, we all know that phone records record everything. Digital evidence stands on its own. So in every other case, in every other case, digital forensic data is okay. But all of a sudden, in this case, it's not. And the only reason why it's being challenged is because it's devastating to the Commonwealth, and it's gonna, when it's proven and authenticated, it's game over. We're done here with that. I mean, 227 happened.
Vic, is the paramedic just a coincidence?
Listen, Richard Green, the FBI expert from Quantico, and Alan Jackson are not going to come in and try to give you this basically buffoon explanation to what happened. Forensic data doesn't lie. The Google search was deleted. Kevin, me and you could go back on this. We're never going to.
This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do.
No, it's just a coincidence.
It's coming up. It's coming up. Great points by everybody. When we come back, we're going to talk about the other McCabe, Jennifer's husband, Matthew McCabe. What did he say? Welcome back. Off the top of the show, I was talking about this alleged conspiracy by the defense. That's what this trial seems to be about, more so than the case that the prosecutors are trying to prove. So what that means for the jury, I don't know. That's another discussion for another time. Let's get back to this alleged conspiracy. Take a listen here to the cross-examination of Matthew McCabe, okay, Jennifer McCabe's husband, about a text chain that was going on, text messages that were sent back and forth. Really interesting. Is it evidence of a conspiracy? Take a listen.
On February 1st of 2022 at 12:51 and 49 seconds, you texted the group chat to say, ask Chris to ask some questions, correct?
Yep, I'm reading it right now. Yes, that's correct.
And who was the Chris you were referring to?
That would be Chris Albert.
Brian's brother, correct?
That is correct.
And then you texted your wife, Brian Albert, and Nicole Albert, quote, tell them the guy never went in the house, correct?
Yeah, that's part of the same text. Yes.
Mr. McCabe, who was the guy that you were referring to? Does he have a name?
That would be John O'Keefe.
When you told the group to tell them the guy never went in the house, that was you talking about how you should all get your stories straight, correct?
No.
You would agree with me that your stories are all straight in terms of the guy never went in the house, correct?
Objection.
Can you answer that?
John never went in the house. It's not a story, it's a fact.
Yeah. Well, when you said, tell them the guy never went in the house, Brian Albert was on that exchange still, was he not? He was still part of the group text?
Yes, Brian is on the exchange.
And Brian Albert was the one to respond, wasn't he?
Let me switch pages here. 12:51.
He responded, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And then at that point, you knew Brian Albert was the oldest brother of the Albert family, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The oldest sibling in that family, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in his response to your instructions that his younger brother, Chris, should say that John O'Keefe never went in the house, or the guy never went in the house, you would agree with me that he responded with one word, correct?
Yes, he did.
And in response to you saying the guy never went in the house, Brian Albert's response was, exactly, correct?
Yes, that's his response.
We're done here.
All right, Joseph Krowski, is that a problem for prosecutors?
No, and that was rehabilitated by ABA Lally. There was an explanation in context after this had happened. Certainly the death of a police officer would generate a lot of publicity, and news cameras were around, and one of the people that they were trying to get comment from was Chris Albert, who hadn't even been at the house. And I think there was a suggestion, just say the truth. He never went in the house. And that's where we're at with the evidence right now. That's where we're at with all of the witnesses. In fact, he never went at the house. And I wish the body language expert was on tonight, because I've seen a lot of witnesses, and Matt McCabe was quick, he was consistent, and, you know, he was credible.
Nick, did you think this is evidence of this alleged conspiracy?
I do. I believe Matt McCabe, you know, before this text message was sent, he was driving up and down the street. He's reporting everything back to Brian Albert as if, you know, if it had nothing to do with these people, then why were they so concerned with the fact that cops were at the neighbor's house? And then to send a text message and use the word "the guy" 2 days after John O'Keefe was murdered, kind of like his wife when she called 911 and she said there's a man on the lawn. They are distancing themselves from John O'Keefe at this moment. They're not even using his name. And he's telling Brian Albert to make sure your brother tells them that the guy wasn't in the house. But the interesting thing about Chris Albert not being at the house is in his police report, it states that Julie and Chris both followed Brian Albert back to his house. Now, all of a sudden, he wasn't there. So the fact that Channel 4 wants to talk to somebody who wasn't even at the house, what type of information would they get from him unless it was handed over information?
Kevin?
It takes a complete reimagining, a delusional reimagining of these completely normal texts to imagine these as some sign of a conspiracy. It's a couple of days after the crime. Chris was not at the house. And they're in a group text, and a reporter is talking to Chris. He's like, what do I say? And Matt, who was in the house, says John never came in. And Brian, who was in the house, says exactly. That's all completely normal. And it bothers me that people are reimagining this. It's really, you know, our founding fathers had the wisdom to entrust our justice with the jury of our peers. But I'm starting to worry about our peers. I hope, you know, when I see some of the stuff that's going on with this mob, and that to believe some of these crazy theories, it's just unbelievable.
Okay, I want to put a picture up on the screen. Julie Nagel, important witness in all this. She is the one who said she saw that black blob 5 to 6 feet on the yard, which would be Officer John O'Keefe. And she said she blurted it out to everyone in the car on the ride home. Well, the man driving that car was Matthew McCabe. Here's what he had to say about that.
As you back out of the driveway, the rear end of your car would have been facing towards Cedar Crest.
Correct.
And then you would straighten out, and now you've got a straight shot up toward Chapman Street, correct?
Yes.
And it would also mean that you drove the length of the Albert's property, correct?
Yes.
While you did that, sir, Julie Nagel never said, "What was that?" Did she?
I did not hear Julie say that.
She never said she had seen a black object, correct?
I did not hear her say that.
And you never stopped the car because you never heard Julie Nagel say anything about anybody being in trouble, correct?
I did not hear her say it.
All right, Joseph, is Julie Nagel a problem for prosecutors here? Because this is a second time where there seems to be some witness that's saying something completely different than what she testified to.
No, just because he didn't hear it doesn't mean she didn't say it. They're leaving in a snowstorm. He's driving, and that bolsters his credibility. Would have been easy for him to say if he wasn't a truth-telling person. I'm sure I heard that. He answered truthfully. Didn't hear it. But again, and he definitely tried to insinuate that it hadn't been said. It just means he didn't hear it. Important point about that, though. It was difficult to see at that time when they had left. The jury was able to see the conditions when Karen Reed allegedly for the first time saw John O'Keefe. It was almost whiteout conditions, and it was dark, and it would be almost impossible to see John O'Keefe. Yet Karen Reed said, "There he is, there he is, there he is." Started slapping on the windows. They stopped the car, and she ran out to John O'Keefe. The implication being that she had already been to the house and knew where he was. So, you know, again, you cherry-picked a little part of it, but in context, I think that's actually helpful to the prosecution.
Hi, Nick, what did you think of that testimony that she's the only one in that car who was able to see John O'Keefe that morning?
Well, it's interesting how it's okay that she was able to see John O'Keefe, but when Karen Reed saw John O'Keefe, it's a big, big problem. But one problem about everybody's story is that there was a dusting of snow on the lawn. So if John O'Keefe was hit, when they're saying John was hit by Karen's car, there would have been a dusting of snow. So most likely from his body temperature and his body heat, it would have melted that dusting of snow. But when they found John O'Keefe's body, there was at least 2 inches of snow underneath his body. And the biggest point is, where is the blood? They found 6 drops of blood outside. This guy lost 3 liters of
I saw
blood.
the blood was in the it was in the solo cups. In the solo cups.
He lost half of his blood in his body, and it's nowhere to be found because it was on the basement floor.
We're out of time for tonight and this week, but big thanks, Nick Rocco, Joseph Krasky Jr., Kevin Lenahan. We'll see you again next week.